Welcome to the show. We have an interesting one for you today, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to look at vitamins, particularly vitamin D. It's a very important subject matter as we're now well into summer. And it's a very important vitamin for our overall health and well-being. But before we dive right in, please head to buymeacoffee.com/Samson King. Support the channel there. We really appreciate it. All right, let's take a look. Should you take vitamin D? Here's the science. Some people take too much, and too many get too little. That's the conundrum. Experts explain who needs D supplements and why. So, throughout this topic, we're going to be jumping into some snippets and some charts and some side notes as we go along. Determining who needs vitamin D supplements and how much is complicated. Nutritional science is supposed to chart a course to our healthier selves. But contradictory scientific results and interpretations can muddy the waters. And few nutrients have recently demonstrated that more clearly than vitamin D. At one point, it seemed that everybody should be taking vitamin D supplements, and that doing so would protect against a whole host of maladies, from bone problems to heart disease and cancer. More recently, new studies appear to have debunked many of those claims. The more research we do, the more we find out. But a closer look at the research reveals a more nuanced message around vitamin D supplements. They can be key to correcting deficiencies. The people who already have enough, which is most of the American public, are generally unlikely to see benefits from taking large doses. I, for one, was taking large doses during COVID because we were indoors the whole time. Experts have come to worry about supplement enthusiasts overdosing in the belief that more is better, or at the other extreme, some nutrient-deprived people shunning them altogether. Ultimately, says Roger Bouillon, an endocrinologist at KU Leuven in Belgium, says, it's like, for most things, you need an optimal amount, not too little, not too much. Yet, working out who needs vitamin D supplements, how much, and what the specific health benefits are, remains tricky, with questions remaining. So, here's some of what we know. Let's take a look. What does vitamin D do, and where does it come from? Let's start at the basics as we learn together. Hope you enjoy the ride. The importance of vitamin D came to light at the start of the Industrial Revolution in the late 1700s, when people in northern climes crowded in dark, polluted cities and spent more time working indoors. The majority of children in cities like Boston developed rickets, wherein bones soften, weaken, and often deform. Scientists eventually discovered that exposure to sunlight would curb and prevent the disease. Later, researchers learned that UV lights from the sun kickstarts a reaction that generates vitamin D. So that explains why Africans weren't getting this bone disease called rickets, whereas people in the so-called developing or developed world in the north were getting this disease. So, scientists discovering that exposure to sunlight would cure and prevent this disease was very interesting, right? So later, researchers learned that UV light from the sun kickstarts a reaction that generates vitamin D. the vitamin gets converted into its active form in the kidneys and then is shuttled to the intestine, where it stimulates cells to move calcium, a key building block of bones, into the bloodstream. The most important thing vitamin D does is intestinal calcium absorption, says Sylvia Christakos, a biochemist at Rutgers, New Jersey Medical School. So, we now know that severe vitamin D deficiency can cause the disease known as rickets, in which a lack of calcium leads to bone deformities. Right? The disease was common among children in dark northern cities before the discovery of vitamin D. Again, that's an interesting way of saying things. Discovery of vitamin D, but a lot of people in Africa were already absorbing vitamin D or getting it from food and nutrients. So, was it really discovered? That's an interesting topic. Just like, Christopher Columbus discovered America, but people were already there. Though the effects are most severe in children, vitamin D deficiencies can also cause a softening of adult bones called osteomalacia and increase the risk of osteoporosis, where bones become weak, brittle, and more prone to fractures. So though experts debate what exactly constitutes a vitamin D deficiency, and know that healthy levels may vary from person to person, everyone agrees that blood levels should not go below 12 nanograms per milliliter to avoid severe deficiency. Such severe deficiencies and the bone ailments they cause are still rampant across the world. Surprisingly, more than 30% of people in some sunny Middle Eastern countries are severely deficient, which may be partly attributed to skin-covering traditional clothing. By contrast, in Finland, a sun-deprived country with dark winters, severe deficiencies are relatively rare, thanks to government policies to fortify dairy products with extra vitamin D. In contrast, around 20% of the United Kingdom's population is severely deficient by some estimates due to its northern, cloudy weather and a lack of fortified foods. I can tell you about the weather in the United Kingdom. We're currently in July, and it's freezing cold outside and raining. If you teleported here or you woke up here, you wouldn't believe that it's summer, and you wouldn't believe that it's July. The United States, where many dairy products and some juices and breakfast cereals are fortified, falls somewhere in the middle. Around 6% of people are severely deficient. So for the most part in the U.S., we don't see frank nutrient deficiencies, says Regan Bailey, a nutrition expert at Texas A&M University, who recently co-authored a review on supplement use among the public in an annual review of nutrition. Some research groups have produced much larger deficiency estimates by using blood level thresholds that many experts say are too high to quantify as nutrient deficiencies. Fast forward, since 2010, the National Academy of Medicine has recommended relatively modest daily doses, 400 international units, or IUs for babies, 600 IUs for everyone up to the age 70, and 800 IUs for older people. These doses are designed to achieve levels of 20 nanograms per milliliter, more than enough to avoid severe deficiencies for otherwise healthy people in the United States. Most people should be able to get these doses through brief sun exposure, says John Christopher Gallagher, an endocrinologist at Creighton University in Omaha, Nebraska. Measuring vitamin D production in the skin is not an exact science, But 5 to 10 minutes daily exposure without sunblock of just the face, neck, hands, and arms should do the trick in the sunnier months, even in temperate places like Boston. While it's entirely possible to get enough vitamin D this way, the official stance of the American Academy of Dermatology is to not get vitamin D from sun exposure. Fortified dairy products and other foods will also provide enough. Foods that naturally contain vitamin D, such as fatty fish, egg yolks, red meat, liver, and irradiated or sun-dried mushrooms, which are especially rich in vitamin D due to their increased exposure to UV light, can also help. If you're out and about and you have sun exposure during some months of the year, Gallagher says, you probably get plenty of vitamin D. That's especially true if you have enough dairy in your diet. So let's jump to the side and look at dietary sources of vitamin D, and all measurements are in international units I use. So we've got rainbow trout, which is a freshwater fish, about 645 per 3 ounces. American cheese, low fat or fat-free fortified, 85 per 1.5 ounces. Orange juice, 100% fortified, 100 per cup. Mushrooms, raw, various, 114 to 1,110 per cup. Milk, low fat, 1%, 117 per cup. Soy milk, unsweetened, fortified, 119 per cup. Light tuna, canned, 231 per 3 ounces. Salmon, various, 383 to 570 per 3 ounces. So these are a few common food items that can deliver a significant portion of your daily vitamin D needs, either because they are naturally rich in it or because they are fortified with the vitamin. So, does anyone need supplements? Generally, people need supplements only when they're not likely to get enough from natural or dietary sources, health experts say. Deficiency-prone populations include breastfed infants who don't get fortified formula, elderly people whose skin makes vitamin D less efficiently, and pregnant women. People with dark skin tones should also take care to get sufficient vitamin D, because melanin pigmentation in the skin blocks UV light. That's why black people don't get sunburned, like white people are more prone to. People in northern latitudes, like England, should all take a supplement during the winter, adds nutritional scientist Susan Lanham-New of the University of Surrey in the UK. Although that's less important in places like the United States that have food fortification. Experts worry that it's often the people already getting enough vitamin D through diet and lifestyle who are the most likely to take supplements, Christakos notes. Meanwhile, communities who need vitamin D supplements the most might not realize their need and may have read news reports suggesting that supplements aren't necessary. That's an especially dangerous message in countries where deficiencies are common. For instance, in the UK, where physicians still see children with deficiency-related ailments, says Martin Hewiston, a molecular endocrinologist at the University of Birmingham in that country. One of his UK colleagues is struggling to persuade some of her vitamin D deficient patients to take supplements because they believe it's a waste of time. For anyone concerned that they're not getting enough vitamin D, experts say that up to 1,000 IUs a day would more than suffice. If possible, Lanham's new ads make sure it's vitamin D3, a version typically extracted from sheep wool that appears to be better at raising vitamin D blood levels than D2, which is often vegan and mushroom-based. From sheep wool, we learn something new every day, guys. But avoid the high doses of 5,000, 10,000, or 20,000 IUs, or even higher, that can be found in drugstores or online, stresses Joanne Manson, an endocrinologist and epidemiologist at Brigham and Women's Hospital and Harvard Medical School. This is a PR lesson here, right? Sometimes you hear do something to the extreme, sometimes you hear do something minimally, sometimes you hear do something in the middle, sometimes you hear no good is bad news, sometimes with crisis comes, they say you're better off not saying anything, sometimes you're told that it's better to attack it face front. So you got to use a scale and measure things and taper them and know when to use what when. So this is a great PR media lesson we're learning here through vitamin D. So too much vitamin D, even when taken occasionally, can sometimes cause bone health to deteriorate and lead to an overdose of calcium in the blood and urine, resulting in nausea and even kidney failure. This is serious stuff, guys. There are reports of people in the UK and US ending up in the hospital after taking excessive doses. And keep in mind, this is over-the-counter stuff. This is not usually prescribed. So let's jump away from the research again and take a look at the group at risk of vitamin D deficiency. So in the Middle East, where it's sunny all the time, they're still at risk because one study in Saudi Arabia found nearly 32% of people, especially women, to be severely deficient, likely due to the lack of fortified foods and skin covering traditional clothing. Right? Women in Saudi Arabia are usually covered in a gown from head to toe. They're usually wearing the hijab, and a lot of them also have their faces covered. So the tradition there and the clothing is causing vitamin D deficiency as their skin is not getting any sunlight, even though they're in a very sunny environment. Pregnant women and infants are also at risk. A small study of breastfeeding mothers and their infants who received little to no supplementation found a high proportion of mothers and 18% of infants to be severely deficient. So while breastfeeding is encouraged for the health of an infant, they also apparently need fortified baby food or milk to get the correct amount of vitamin D. The elderly. Globally, severe deficiencies are common among nursing home residents, with prevalence of severe deficiencies ranging from 8% up to 94% in some populations. Right. I would assume in nursing homes you're mostly inside, so you're not getting enough sun. Skin color. In the U.S., nearly 18% of non-Hispanic black people meet the thresholds for severe deficiency, compared to around 8% of Asian, 6% of Hispanic, and 2% of white people. So this notion of that black people don't need vitamin D because, we're always in the sun, we have dark skin and melanin, it's actually counterintuitive. Our melanin is actually stopping the absorption of vitamin D from the sun. So we actually need more of the supplement than our counterparts in the Asian and white demographics. Do your research, guys. Don't believe what you hear from friends and family. Do your research. Another great PR lesson there. Temperate climates. According to some estimates, nearly 20% of people in the UK are severely deficient, likely due to its temperate climate and lack of fortified foods. Again, the UK barely has a summer. You would think summer is over and July just began. Winter. One study in the northern country of Estonia found that during the winter, 8% of participants had severely deficient vitamin D levels, compared to less than 1% in the summer. The more you know. So certain groups of people are at greater risk of not getting enough vitamin D. We've just gone through some examples. Diving back in. Some experts have advised that Black Americans in particular take higher doses of supplements. For instance, 2,500 IUs, as they're especially prone to low levels. But here's a mystery. Even though 17.5% of African Americans have deficient levels of vitamin D, they tend to have better bone health than comparable deficient white Americans, notes biomedical scientist Laverne Brown of the National Institutes of Health, NIH. It's possible, she says, that African Americans need less vitamin D than other populations, perhaps because they're better at metabolizing vitamin D to its final active form. A genetic advantage. If that's true, then high doses may have a greater risk of causing harm in African Americans. The plot thickens, right? It's very interesting. So, she says, we just don't have the studies that are focusing on these populations in order to come up with definitive answers, Brown says. Very interesting again. So the amount of research that's done sometimes can depend on race, right? We're not equally being served in the medical world. In the meantime, an expert panel meeting in 2017 concluded that the current recommended intake should be enough for African Americans, the same as everyone else. So who do we listen to? Anything above 8,000 IU is not clear that there's a real need for that, Brown says. So, could higher doses have benefits? More than 2 decades ago, scientists began to make observations suggesting that vitamin D at higher doses could have benefits beyond bone health. Dozens of studies described strong correlations between people's vitamin D levels and a range of diseases like cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, and certain cancers. The lower somebody's or someone's vitamin D levels were, the likelier they were to have these diseases, while higher levels were associated with being healthier. I think it's time to take my vitamin D after breakfast today. Other research showed that many cell types in the lungs, heart, and immune system have receptors for the vitamin to dock onto, hinting at far-reaching effects across the body. Giving vitamin D to lab mice with conditions mimicking human diseases could often improve their ailments. Vitamin D, it seemed, might help to tackle the major diseases of our time. From New Zealand to Europe to North America, scientists launched large clinical trials, enrolling thousands of people over multiple years to test whether vitamin D supplements would decrease their risk of disease. Importantly, the studies focused on members of the general public who were largely healthy and had adequate levels of vitamin D. These people then received relatively large doses of 2,000 or 4,000 IUs, or even higher. The studies asked whether there were benefits from getting more than the recommended dietary allowance and ending up with blood levels even higher than 20 or 30 nanograms per milliliter, Manson explains. To the disappointment of many scientists, giving these generous doses to healthy people didn't change their risk of developing cancer, heart disease, or asthma, nor did it significantly prevent the progression of type 2 diabetes. Extra vitamin D beyond the recommended levels didn't even do anything to improve bone health or reduce the risk of fractures. This is very interesting. So, jumping out again, let's look at this chart giving the right dose of vitamin D. So, with 400 IU, recommended dose of babies up to 1 year. 600 IU, recommended doses for older infants, children, and adults up to 70. 800 IU, recommended dose for adults age 70 or older. 2,000 IU daily dose administered in some recent clinical studies that didn't see benefits in most people. And a higher extreme, 4,000 IU, the maximum dose recommended in the EU and US. So experts recommend relatively modest daily doses of vitamin D supplements. All right, let's jump back in. There may be a simple biological reason why more vitamin D isn't necessarily better. The version of vitamin D found in supplements needs to be converted in the liver and kidneys to reach its final active form. And that process is probably tightly controlled, says Bullion. The body regulates that so you have the exact amount and not more than what you need. The body is amazing. We should treat it like a temple. The takeaway, many experts agree, is that most healthy people aren't going to benefit from high doses of vitamin D if they already have enough. The tantalizing associations that led researchers to suspect additional powers of vitamin D could have been an illusion, meaning people with illnesses may end up with lower vitamin D levels because of the disease themselves or the unhealthy lifestyles that cause them, says Bullion. So, are larger doses ever helpful? A few of the recent trials hinted that some groups of people may benefit from higher doses, but these possible benefits need to be confirmed in further studies, said Manson, who ran one of the trials called VITAL, 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 which studied nearly 26,000 US adults over 5 years and looked at supplements of 2,000 IUs of vitamin D, as well as omega-3 fatty acids. In that study, participants didn't have a lower risk of developing cancer, but they did have a 25% lower chance of it metastasizing or becoming fatal. Perhaps, says Manson, vitamin D makes tumors less likely to metastasize and kill. VITAL also reported that high doses of vitamin D made people less likely to develop certain autoimmune conditions like rheumatoid arthritis, psoriasis, and lupus. Manson notes that these benefits appear to be most visible among people with a healthy weight compared to overweight or obese participants. But she cautions that more research is needed to understand these observations and confirm the observed benefits of larger doses. Physicians in clinical practice, of course, have leeway in prescribing higher doses to certain people as they see fit, such as for osteoporosis patients or people with conditions that hamper the absorption of vitamin D through the diet, like Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis. What don't we know yet? As they probe potential effects of higher doses in non-deficient people, researchers still don't know how many roles vitamin D might have. The trouble is that recent trials don't tell us whether having enough vitamin D is important for maintaining healthy heart function or avoiding cancer, for instance. Only that having more than that won't help in most cases, so there's a threshold to the benefits. To prove that adequate vitamin D has health benefits beyond keeping bones strong, scientists need more research in which some deficient people receive supplements and the rest receive a placebo. But such studies are hard to conduct in places like the US, where severe deficiencies are relatively rare. It's also not ethically justifiable to seek out people who are deficient and then deprive half of them of much-needed supplements because of the risk of poor bone health in vitamin D deficient people. Some scientists believe that having enough vitamin D could be key to maintaining heart and immune system health and preventing diabetes and cancer, and perhaps even be important for brain function, athletic performance, and other claims. So that's one of the reasons why medical research and advancement in medical technology seems to be slow. There's always an ethical aspect to the development of technology in healthcare and the development of medication. The evidence is particularly strong in the immune system, says Houston, whose research points to the key roles of vitamin D in immune cells, and indeed in human trials that by chance included some deficient people showed benefits of supplementation and warding off infections. But there just aren't enough data yet, Hewinson said. I think this is the issue facing the field as a whole. That's all we have for you today. This has been very interesting. We're glad you could join us. Thanks for stopping by. Please like and subscribe. And visit us on buymeacoffee.com/Samson King. That's buymeacoffee.com/Samson King. Support the channel there. We appreciate it. Thanks for stopping by, and we'll see you next time.